Welcome to future-proofing your 2026 sales compensation plans. My name is Swastik Patel. I am field CTO here at Xactly. In my role, I spend the majority of my time helping organizations align their technology with their revenue strategy. So I am thrilled to be guiding this conversation today here with such an incredible panel. I will introduce everyone very quickly. We have Sam here, who is the CRO at Xactly. We have Bayley, who is the Director of RevOps at Xactly. And lastly, we have Silvia, who is our guest speaker and a customer as well of Xactly. She is the Director of Sales Comp at Instacart. Okay, now a quick housekeeping item to make sure that we get through, as much content as possible in the next 30 minutes. We won't be doing a live Q&A, but if you have questions as you're watching, feel free to reach out to any of us via LinkedIn. We will have details in the chat. Now, today, we're going to be breaking down the 2026 planning lifecycle from three critical perspectives. The first one is the executive strategy, right, which is required to drive organizational buy-in. The second is operational frameworks that are required to pivot from static to dynamic planning. And then lastly, the real-world execution of managing complex plans at any scale. All right. So with that, to kick things off, I would like to ask the panel a question. And Sam, we will start with you first, and then Bayley, and then Sylvia. But in one word or phrase, what do you think is a single biggest risk to the revenue plan success that leaders should avoid in 2026?
I think it would be the whiplash effect, which is student body left, student body right sort of thing. That would kind of be my answer.
Bayley?
Assumptions and like the wrong kinds of assumptions. So, you have to make some in your plan, but you want to make the right ones. We can maybe dive into that more later, but
Of course.
yeah.
Sylvia?
I think for me it'd be overcomplication. Like, why make things so complicated in a world where we already have a lot of market uncertainty, right?
Perfect. Thank you for that very quick sort of synopsis of the things to avoid. Sam, let's start with the human element of all of this, right? We know that without buy-in, the plan sort of fails, right? And it applies to more than just sales reps. It involves finance, it involves HR, ops, all have to be pulling in the same direction, all have to have a shared vision. How do you, as a CRO, ensure that the entire organization is aligned on the new strategy? How do you break down those silos within the organization?
Yeah, that's a really good and a very important question, Swastik. So first of all, for us in our company, we're a software company. And so we start our new fiscal year off, like many companies, especially software companies do, with a sales kickoff. So we bring just about everyone that's part of the quote unquote field team to a physical location, and we do a 2-3 day sales kickoff with a structured agenda, with breakouts by role, by product, by area. That's sort of the crescendo of what is happening, sort of starting now, leading up to sales kickoff. And so the point is that the breaking down of the barriers and the silos and ensuring that the human element is aligned and is on the journey, on the planning journey with you and with the company doesn't start at sales kickoff. It starts way before that. And so understanding what the vision is, what the multi-year vision and objective is of the company, from a market perspective, from a financial perspective, from a planning, of course, perspective, I think is really important, because that is grounding the business in the priorities that will ultimately become the operational priorities and levers that are going to be discussed at the sales kickoff, for example. But it also, you can't invest in you can't invest in every single option or opportunity or potential. And so it really allows you to be ruthless in how you prioritize. And so that's sort of number one. It starts way before kind of the beginning of your fiscal year, or in our case, this big event we do in sales kickoff. And part of that is explaining the planning process, the planning methodology, top down, bottoms up. This is how kind of we do it versus a zero-based budgeting approach, for example. But also socializing very frequently the planning calendar, the milestones, and when employees and certain functions and leaders and managers are expected to participate and weigh in on their part, in their view of the plan. So it doesn't feel like it hasn't gone through a process where someone's throwing something over the wall only for you to be forced to hopefully catch it if you see it. I think those sort of things are very important relative to the human side, and how you really have to start way in advance and incorporate in your process, in your planning process, all of the various teams and elements and departments from a project plan milestone perspective. It helps illuminate who's doing what by when from a planning perspective.
Thank you, Sam. Those are great insights. And Bayley, if I bring you in onto that silo concept, if finance has one set of assumption and sales has another, right? The plan breaks. We all know that. But from a RevOps perspective, how do you build sort of the processes, the infrastructure to support the organizational buy-in that Sam just talked about?
Yeah, so you sort of, to do what Sam's talking about, I almost have to take it like a layer down and have an ongoing process and project plan that we can go back and rerun parts of it at different points in time. So that if Sam comes back, maybe 90 days from now and says, hey, what about that one version we talked about that looked like this, or that was slightly different, or that had head count like that, or that we discussed in that one meeting with FP&A that they liked that had these other assumptions. Because kind of to your point, Swastik, the assumptions become kind of like playing a game of Jenga. And if you layered too many of them, it all falls apart.
Of course. Yeah.
And yeah, so I've found with my team, if we build it like a program, like a project plan, we can save versions. We can make it so we're like, okay, let's go back and look at this component from this, like run it back from this part of the project, and then version control from there.
And on
and
that
then share with our
of thought, Bayley, thank you, by the way, for that insight. But on that line of thought, how important is a sort of single source of truth as well, from a data perspective, if you will, to bringing everyone together so things don't get lost in translation? Because we also know that that can be an issue from time to time.
It becomes incredibly important, and it becomes incredibly important to be very on the same page with everyone cross-functionally of who's owning what. If I'm owning on Sam's behalf the go-to-market plan, but maybe I'm not owning the pipe gen plan for marketing, maybe marketing ops is owning that, or FP&A is owning that, but I need to be in lockstep with my partners in finance. And then when we get to Silvia, get to sort of the fun stuff, like designing the comp plans, and then if we have to go back again to head count or any roster changes, we all have to be in lockstep of which part of the process and part of the system and who owns which data inputs where. Because I've also been on teams where I wasn't necessarily involved in the process. I was just a receiver of those inputs. And that kind of flying blind is scary too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Sam aligns the leadership, Bayley builds the infrastructure, and Silvia, you are where the rubber meets the road, right? How do you ensure that the compensation plan reflects the entire organization's goals, not just, things like profitability and retention, rather than just the top line revenue? And so how do you make sure that the comp plan signals the company's broader priorities out to the field?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think from a personal level, I try to always be part of the conversations that Bailey's having. I'm trying to be a part of the conversations that Sam is having from the start, because it gives me a little bit of a head start of what to expect, how to set those goals and make those plans work. But I have a unique space in the people team because I sit on the people team. And so a huge piece for me is connecting the dots between that sales plan design and our culture, right? So it's very important to make everyone feel, doesn't matter which level you're in or which role you're playing from a sales perspective, to be part of the company culture. And that means that my plans should be designed in a way that produces profit, performance, rewards, but also connects them to the broader culture and mission of the company, right? So if we're trying to go far together, if we're trying to put it all on the table, which are two of the biggest ones for Instacart, we're definitely designing those plans to be successful in those areas and making sure that everyone knows that that's our end goal as well. As much as we want to get to the numbers and we want to see you exceed, we also want to make sure that you understand that there's career growth within those plans, and we retain the best performers. We help the lower performers get to where they need to get to feel successful, right?
Thank you, Sylvia. So I think what you're getting at is this is not just about transparency and visibility into what you're earning and what you could be earning, which is important, but also transparency and visibility into the larger goals and the strategy of the company. Would you agree?
Correct. We're all in it together. We're all trying to feel successful one way or another. And it takes a village to get there. We call it our carrot family, right? It takes all of us to get there. And I think it's just important to align our plans to be transparent, not overcomplicated, but also part of the company's mission, right?
Of course. Wonderful. Thank you again for your insight. Bayley, moving beyond static annual planning is a major goal for any office, right? Because typically we see you plan once and then you kind of execute towards the plan. But we also know that things change, things are in flux, people move in and out. So how do you go about building a dynamic operational framework? What does that look like in practice? If we're, just not just talking about strategy, but more tactical, how does that look like in practice to allow for these agile adjustments without creating chaos and as those changes are happening?
Honestly, it's a lot about making sure you're tracking performance from all angles against your annual plan. So that's in
Right.
Q1, as soon as the year starts, is the pipeline I'm generating matching up to the components I want to pay out on in my comp plan? Are the types of deals entering my pipeline that I want to pay those really big modifiers on? Are things like are the behavior drivers I set out to drive coming to fruition? And if I'm not seeing those early signs, those are conversations I need to have with Sam and my SLT sooner rather than later and be upfront about those. Because even it's not so much about having the infrastructure. In my opinion, it's a willingness to have the tough conversations and be willing to make changes if you need to, because you're going to have to do the work either way, whether you have the infrastructure to make it easier for yourself or not.
Yeah, and as they say, bad news always gets worse with time. So you might as well tackle it as early as possible. But I do want to ask an honest question, and I'll be candid here. We talk about continuous planning. It's something that we all aspire to do. But when you change a comp plan mid-year, it scares people. It scares your reps. It scares the finance team. It scares everyone. How do you balance the need to pivot, which is Sam's need? Sam requires a pivot based on market conditions and all of those, and the need for stability in the sales organization. So can we talk, maybe Sam, I'll invite your perspective here as well, and how we strike that balance.
I think it's sometimes you have to evaluate, is this, something how big is the problem I need to solve? Is this something that I can solve with an amendment or an addendum to the plan? Is it a modification to an existing plan? Is this a real temporary fix that a spiff or a temporary incentive can solve? Or is this something that this role wasn't designed correctly and we have to adjust something with the role? I'm not sure what Sam or Sylvia think.
Yeah, Bayley, no, I agree. But like from my perspective, Swastik, as part of the annual plan, if you are on a single system of record and a common sort of planning solution, then one of the things that we do is we attempt to anticipate after quarter one, at the half year point, what sort of things would we anticipate potentially putting in place if things are hot or cold, or things are moving in a different direction? It's kind of yellow, not green or red from a lighting perspective. And so that anticipation allows us to plan ahead of time to allow finance to get a sense of what we might decide to do at that point in time. And based on what we actually see the business and where we see what's happening in the market. And I think that really, and memorializing that within the plan at the start of the year, and not in a spreadsheet or not something that gets forgotten or that's in an email or in a Slack channel, I think is really important. And kind of the Bailey's point is, those things can be, a spiff, a time-based as a very specific sort of need that the business has, or it could be a big thing, like with the advent of Gen AI and LLMs and agents. They tend to be more consumption based than contract based, or annual value based or revenue based or margin based, et cetera. So that might perpetuate the need to make a structural change or an add mid-year, but being able to anticipate that ahead of time, it gets back to the people side, makes the implementation of it really a lot smoother.
Right. So to summarize, I think Sam and Bailey, what you're saying is if you are able to anticipate some of these changes and being able to, Sam, in your words, memorialize it as part of your comp structure, then you're in a much better position to future-proof your organization and avoid these sort of surprises towards the end. So, Silvia, Instacart is a large enterprise organization, right? In many similar orgs, compensation plans tend to be rigid. They tend to be slow to change. How do you develop a compensation structure that manages the complexity, but remains flexible enough to support quick adjustments, similar to what, Bailey and Sam were just talking about?
Yeah. Well, I have a very lean team, right? I think most of us operate with lean teams. And so one of the biggest pushes on my end from a leadership perspective is just automation. Like, how do I get everything automated in a tool? We use Xactly. How do I get it automated, not just from a perspective of getting people paid, but from sales plan docs, from a pivot in crediting policies, a pivot in any of our governance policies? How do I focus on dedicating time, even with a lean team, to making sure that we have full automation, right? Because that opens up a window of data, like influx. We have an influx of like data to provide to leaders, to provide to users, which sometimes helps us push back on the pivots to being creative and, hey, I have an idea, let's act on it. Wait, let's hold back a little bit because there's data that supports we probably should slow down. Or yes, we're fully on board, we're ready to go, we have the infrastructure set in place, our system is ready to go, we have the automation that we need with the capability to make those changes, right? And so I think for us, a key area has always been automation. That means laying off of kind of the Google Sheets and making sure that our system is fully automated and prepared in all of the policies that we implement, quarter over quarter. And along the way, it's making sure that our sales team also is overly communicated on those changes, right? And I think it's being kind of like setting the sales plan design, set sail, but being the life vest that sticks to it, right? And so like I anticipate some of the flaws and some of the good pieces to it and be reactive to it, both from an automation perspective, from a communication perspective, and that builds trust. I think in general that builds trust. It builds trust in our accuracy and our ability to be flexible and our ability to use our tool, and et cetera, right? And so I think in a just an era of AI, there's so much automation we can find that when we have to function with a lean team, this is the area that I truly believe we have to prioritize, right?
Great. So to summarize, Sylvia, what I heard you say is that having a lean, data-informed team that embraces automation allows you to create this more sort of structure around that allows you to manage this complexity. And then, of course, communication is key to the field so that they are trusting what's coming from you as
Right.
well. And on that point, on the point of trust, I'll ask you a follow-up, which is, a lot of times we also see shadow accounting that's happening in the field, right? Typically in terms of, someone has an Excel spreadsheet going on in the background, figuring out how much they're going to earn. And given the scale of and volume of the data that you manage, how do you operationalize that accuracy so that we are preventing that sort of shadow accounting happening in the background?
Yeah, I think some people are natural born shadow accounters. I think, like
That's
accounting,
fair.
and they lean towards always
Yep.
checking or double checking our work. But I think if we can build, again, it's building the trust in the system and what they're seeing, being very transparent. The key areas are providing them with visibility to how they're getting paid ahead of time,
Mhm.
understanding the plan. We do a lot on onboarding our new employees,
Right.
but onboarding our internal transfers too. Do you understand your plan, how it functions, how multipliers work, how thresholds work, et cetera, and why we've instituted them. And we support several verticals. It's not just SaaS on our side. And so again, it's part of making sure that every single one of those is automated. We don't have one that's kind of sitting outside, and it's consistent, and our processes umbrella every single vertical that we support. And so we've invested a lot of time in the automation of our system just to make sure that we get um, everything in the hands of people ahead of time before they get paid instead of after they get paid. So they become very just trustworthy. It's a trustworthy tool, trustworthy data, and therefore they know it's accurate, right? And quarter over quarter, that trust just builds, and then it kind of like they lay low on the accounting pieces. But I definitely think it takes time. It takes a lot of over communication. It takes a lot of understanding how we're automating as well. Like we're not just doing just things to hide things or and communicating ahead of time too, right?
And as they say, trust and respect are earned, right? As
Correct, correct, correct.
demanded. So thank you again for that, Sylvia. And so again, to the panel, we've talked about strategy, we've talked about agility, we've talked about complexity, we've talked about, breaking down silos and barriers, we've talked about being data informed, leveraging AI, a lot of different topics in the last, 20 minutes or so. If everyone on this webinar who is listening leaves here and does one thing tomorrow to improve their 2026 planning processes, what should it be? And maybe Sam, we'll start with you on this one.
I would say, modernize, automate, and streamline, because it's going to next year's plan and the second year's and the third year's plan is coming fast. And planning, I feel like sometimes is a game of survival. Let me just get through it and kind of kick the can down the road. And I think it catches up with you, especially in the uber competitive and dynamic and fast moving world that we live in. And so that's what I would think about, how you can automate and streamline for next year so that you can have more time to think and less time to,
Right.
use Google Sheets or what have you.
Perfect. Perfect. Maybe Sylvia, we'll go with you, and then we'll round it out with Bailey.
I agree with Sam. Like streamlining, making sure you're organized, giving yourself time, finding that North Star that's important for your team, building around that, making sure automation is built around that as well, and ensuring that every level, from sellers to leaders, understand what you're trying to accomplish through those plans, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Bailey?
run it like a program and like a project plan. Like if SCO is your go live drop dead, you don't want to lose the momentum. Plans need to be out that week so your teams can hit the ground running. Run your program that way, ruthlessly prioritize and drive to that date. And then you have something to memorialize back on, and you know how much time it took last year, and you can keep improving year over year. And then the other thing I would do is map out the bets and assumptions you're making on the fiscal year and stack those up against what you know to be true about your business. I might just be really into RevOps, but that's a fun exercise.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bailey. So this has been a fantastic discussion on building resilient plans. If all of you listening and watching, if you have any questions as you finalize your 2026 models, please feel free to reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. Sam, Bailey, Sylvia, again, thank you all for your time. And to our audience, good luck with your 2026 planning and execution.